So earlier this week, Collie, Heidi, and I made a 3-hour trip to Granbury, a town just southwest of Fort Worth, to attend a seminar on planning transformational worship. Or so we thought. As it turned out, the workshop was, shall we say, less than inspiring. And as Heidi said, we never found the gold nuggets she went there hoping to find. The good news is, we got to spend 6 hours in the car together. No, truly, that was good news. Because during that 6 hours, we came up with some gold nuggets of our own. And we'll be sharing those with you over the next few months. I tell you this because I had hoped on Tuesday that I would find in that seminar something that would serve as the inspiration for this morning's sermon. Unfortunately, that inspiration never came. So as I pondered what I would talk about, a niggling thought kept tugging at my consciousness. A persistent nudge, if you will, to speak to something I felt God was calling me to address. And that is, how do we find hope in the midst of chaos? For the past 7 to 10 days, it seems that everywhere I've looked, my senses have been assaulted by images of chaos and tragedy, both near and far. The devastating earthquake in Nepal last weekend that has left more than 5,000 persons dead and countless others injured and are without a place to call home. Continuing terror attacks or thwarted attacks all across the globe as the situation in the Middle East just continues to unravel. The life of another young man of color lost at the hands of law enforcement personnel amid questionable circumstances, and the resulting anger and frustration that has once again bubbled over into rioting and looting, in which more people are harmed. And closer to home, a family of 5 struck down by a drunk driver who already had 3 DUIs awaiting prosecution. 2 of those children in the family lost their lives. The mother and the other 2 were hospitalized with serious injuries. A dedicated Starflight nurse who somehow lost her life trying to save another's. Colleague whose cancer has returned with a vengeance. Longtime family friends slowly succumbing to the ravages of Alzheimer's and dementia. Care partners battling serious life-threatening illnesses, and members of our own church family who are facing health concerns of their own, or who are worried about the health of someone they love. Sometimes I have to admit it just seems like too much. And I'm simply tempted to withdraw. To turn off my television and my computer and my phone and just pretend that it's all not taking place. That it's not real. But it is. It is real. And my heart gets heavy. And at times I wonder, where is the hope? Fortunately, as a person of faith, I don't have to look too far. Scripture is rife with passage after passage that offer us words of hope from a God who cares deeply for us and who is intricately present to us in our pain and our sorrow. So as I thought about this sermon and the tragedy and the chaos it attempts to address, the first passage I thought of was from one of the prophets, Isaiah, chapter 40. Isaiah is once again addressing a people who are in exile, a people who have lost everything they've known, and been carried off into a strange land with strange and confusing customs. Their temple, the center of their worship, the symbol of their faith has been destroyed, and they too are wondering, is there any hope? So God speaks to them through the prophet, offering them words of comfort. And yes, words of hope. Comfort my people, says your God. Chapter 40 begins. Speak compassionately to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her compulsory service is ended, that her penalty has been paid, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice is crying out. Clear the Lord's way in the desert. Make a level highway in the wilderness for our God. Every valley will be raised up, and every mountain and hill will be flattened. Uneven ground will become level, and rough terrain a valley plain. The Lord's glory will appear, and all humanity will see it together. The Lord's mouth has commanded it. And then in verse 10 it continues, here is the Lord God coming with strength, with a triumphant arm, bringing his reward with him and his payment before him. Like a shepherd, God will tend the flock. He will gather lambs in his arms and lift them onto his lap. He will gently guide the nursing ewes. For me, this passage speaks volumes about the kind of God we worship. It tells us that even though there may be times when we think God has deserted or perhaps forgotten us, God has not. Our God is a faithful God, loving us in the midst of chaos, hurting with us and for us, tending our wounds and gathering us to God's self, just as a shepherd gathers their sheep. And this love, this presence. Sorry, it's making a lot of racket in here. This love, this presence is the basis of our hope. Because God is with us, and we are not alone. Another passage that came to mind was the one from 2 Corinthians I read a few moments ago. In this passage, the Apostle Paul writes as one who knows suffering and adversity firsthand. In fact, his whole life was a journey strewn with adversity, and this is driving me crazy. Below the button, okay. Thank you. We'll try that. All right. Anyway, where was I? Paul. Paul knew adversity. As Dr. Thomas Lane Butts describes it, he not only suffered a lifetime of hatred by the people he left when he became Christian, he suffered years of rejection by the Christians he joined before they would even half trust him. And when they did let him on the team, in a secondary position to begin with, he had to survive adversities that would have destroyed a lesser person. In 2 Corinthians, he catalogs his experiences. Listen. Overworked, scourged, imprisoned, and many times face to face with death. 5 times the terrible 39 lashes. 3 times beaten with rods. 1 stoned. And 3 times shipwrecked. And 24 hours adrift at sea. Constant danger on the road, danger from robbers, danger from rivers, danger from fellow countrymen, and danger from foreigners. I have toiled, he said, and drudged. I have gone without sleep, hungry and thirsty, and suffered from cold and exposure. It's just some of the things the Apostle Paul dealt with. But I suppose the line that best describes his life of adversity comes from the chapter I read, the 4th chapter. And the J.B. Phillips translation puts it this way. We are handicapped on all sides, but we are never frustrated. We are puzzled, but never in despair. We are persecuted, but we never have to stand it alone. We are knocked down, but we are never knocked out. I love that last line. We are knocked down, but we are never knocked out. That declaration by a man who knew more than his share of suffering and pain is a statement of faith that gives me hope. But there are many other things that give me hope as well. And I think most of those have to do with the human instinct, the spirit, if you will, to give and to care, especially in the face of chaos and adversity. There's a video I saw on Facebook this week. Some of you probably saw it as well. It's a YouTube video out of Nepal, in which probably a dozen or so men are working frantically to free a toddler buried in the rubble of buildings toppled by the quake. This particular video just sucked me in. I think it was something like 5 minutes long, but I sat there just enraptured as these men dug through the rubble with their bare hands, taking turns working feverishly to free inch by inch this toddler who at first you couldn't even see. I mean, it was simply amazing. And I still don't understand how that child could even have survived. But it did. And as the child began to emerge from the concrete dust in which it was buried, inch by inch, you could hear the excitement, the joy in the voices of those would-be rescuers. And even though they spoke a language I do not understand, I knew the joy they were expressing. As one commented on the link, it was like the joy of the woman who found the lost coin, the shepherd who located the lost sheep. Those men spoke a universal language of hope and determination and love. And it brought tears to my eyes and joy to my heart. And yes, it gave me hope. Hope also came to Nepal in the form of aid and first responders from our very own United Methodist Committee on Relief, or as we call it, UMCOR. You know better than most how I can sometimes get so frustrated with the things our denomination does wrong. You know that. But I don't give up on it, and here's why. Because there is so much good we can do because we are a connectional church. Because we are part of something larger than this local congregation, as wonderful as it may be. Do you know why UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief, is one of the best, most respected relief agencies in the world? It's because the resources and support of the United Methodist Church as a whole has provided them with an infrastructure that allows them to respond quickly and efficiently and to remain in places of need as long as they are needed. And because the funding for their administration and their staff comes from the United Methodist Church through special day offerings and connectional giving, here's our deal from the bishop thanking us for paying 100% of ours. The money donated to a particular cause like Nepal goes directly to the aid of those persons affected by the disaster to which you designate your giving. 100%. Not many other organizations can say that. I think what I heard last was the Red Cross, as wonderful as they are, 30 to 40 cents for every dollar you donate goes to overhead and administration. But because our connectional church pays for that For UNCOR, 100% of what you give goes directly to aid. And that's something we do well. And that's something I celebrate as a United Methodist. Another glimpse of hope that I saw this week was a photograph of a young African-American boy in Baltimore. Did you see it? Offering bottles of water to law enforcement officers dressed in riot gear. That picture tells us that if we are to overcome prejudice and injustice and hatred, it will happen in part because of simple acts of human kindness that step across the barriers, the false barriers we create. But still, I'm not naive. I also know that the problems of injustice and systemic racism are very, very complex. And that the answers to these problems will necessarily be complex as well. I'll be the first to admit that I don't know all the facts, and I certainly don't have all the answers. But the growing number of young men of color dying at the hands of law enforcement in our country speaks to a problem that is bigger than many of us realize. And it's not just about bad cops or racist cops or young men who are criminals. As one post I saw this week said, not all cops are bad and not all young black males are criminals. Not even those who are arrested. In fact, I would suggest the problems go beyond law enforcement itself and have as much to do with the generations of poverty and despair and injustice these young men and their families have lived with, and the systemic racism that has created these conditions. Earlier this week, someone asked, why the riots and the looting? And again, I didn't have a good answer to offer. I don't know. But I came across something which I think speaks to the underlying causes of what precipitates those riots. There's a heart-rending scene in the movie Forrest Gump. Everybody's seen that, right? One of Tom Hanks' greatest films. Jenny, the childhood girlfriend of the mentally challenged Forrest Gump, has come home from one of her many self-destructive prodigal escapades. And she and Forrest go to the abandoned home place where she lived out her tragic years as a child. The house has deteriorated, the roof has caved in, the front porch steps have fallen down. The sight of the house brings back to Jenny an overwhelming tide of tragedy and pain that she experienced there. The loneliness, the poverty, the physical, emotional, sexual abuse of a drunken father. All of these repressed memories rush in on her, and she just loses it and storms toward the house screaming and throwing things. She throws her shoes, clods of dirt, and all the rocks she can find. And when there are no more rocks to throw, she falls exhausted and sobbing to the ground. And after an awesome stillness and a time of silence, broken only by her sobs, Forrest Gump moves lovingly toward her, and as he lifts her up, he says, Jenny, sometimes there are just not enough rocks. And I don't know, but I think that for some of the people who respond to violence with more violence, there is a despair so deep, so pervasive, so all-consuming, a despair born of generations of poverty and the lack of real opportunity, that they too feel like there are just not enough rocks to throw. I think many believe there's no hope, that the circumstances of their lives can or will get any better. And I'm not saying that makes their response right, because it doesn't. And I'm certainly not trying to excuse their behavior, because it's wrong. I'm simply suggesting that there may be more there than meets the eye. And that instead of a rush to judgment, we might be better off trying to understand the source of their rage, their pain. And we might want to look for ways to compassionately address the circumstances that have led to that. Another sign of hope in all of this week, the thousands who gather in major metropolitan areas all across the country to peacefully protest the injustices they see, not only in law enforcement, but in our country as a whole. There are good people in our world, in our country, in law enforcement, in this church. There are people who use the gifts they have to make a difference in the lives of others. These people, you, and the compassion and generosity with which you approach life, you give me hope. As does my faith in a God who never leaves us alone. A God who promises to always be with us. A God who helps us get back up when life knocks us down. That's why I have hope in the midst of chaos. And that God who gives me hope is the same God we meet today at this table. When we come to receive the gifts of bread and cup, simple gifts that give us sustenance for this journey we call life. Come and eat and partake of hope. Thanks be to God.